So like I said, the topic for today is tackling the CO2 challenge for a sustainable future, the potential of the carbon storage solution. And we have our speakers for today, Jean-Pierre Deflon from IFP School and Dominique Copon, who is a retired CCS advisor at Total. The presentation would last from 6 p.m. to 7 today. And I will just go over the outline for today's webinar. So we have a few guidelines. During the course of the presentation, all attendees are going to be automatically muted. If you have questions, we have the chat icon below. So feel free to put all your questions in there in the course of the presentation, because we will have room for a question and answer session where they will be addressed and attended to by the speakers. And please note that the webinar will be recorded and published on our social networks. So the agenda for today, there would be a presentation rather of the student chapter, the IFP EAG student chapter by Giuseppe Amendola, who is the president. Jean-Pierre Deflon would talk about the karma, and Dominique Copon would go on and speak on tackling CO2 challenges for a sustainable future. Then there will be a question and answer session afterwards. I would then hand over to Giuseppe to give a brief introduction of the student chapter.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm really honored to see so many participants here in our first webinar. So I hope you will enjoy it. So who am I? I'm Giuseppe. I'm the president of the EAG student chapter at IFP School. And now I will briefly introduce the EAG, what is EAG, and our student chapter. So probably as you know, EAG is the European Association of Geoscientists and Engineers that was founded almost 70 years ago as a global association that connects geoscientists and engineers all around the world, providing groundbreaking events, top-level publication, and much more. And the common mission is the innovation in the leading-edge technology. So at the present time, there are more than 19,000 members worldwide involved in and interested in several topics like geophysics, geology, reservoir engineering, mining, and so on. So for more information, please do not hesitate to scan the QR code below or to visit the website of the EAG. And now here is the EAG board of the IFP student chapter. And so let me present you the board that despite these difficulties, the difficulties of these days, this board is still working very hard and with passion in order to engage the EAG community. So the board is composed by me, that is, I'm the president, and then there is Precious, the vice president, Corentin, the treasurer, Federica is the secretary, and then Dalenda, the board manager. So Dalenda and Federica will be the moderator of the Q&A session, so do not hesitate to ask them questions if you have any issues. So here you can see below also the pie chart that is representing the different countries of our members, highlighting some strong points of our chapter. There are diversity and multiculturalism. So let's move on with some events, some pictures to give you just an idea of our activities organized during the year. Such, for example, the first meeting with the members that we had last November with some refreshment also, as you can see in the picture. We had also a Christmas photo contest in December, also a conference, last one, the conference about oil and gas industry in the energy transition era, given by Jean-Jacques Bittot, as you probably know. And last but not least, let's say, we had also the opportunity to publish our first article on the First Break Journal in the issue of May. Moreover, we are very proud that several members of our student chapter are involved in different challenges. As you can see in this slide, like, for example, the online GeoQuiz 2020, the online GeoQuiz that has been ranked among the top 10 student chapter around the world, and also the Minus CO2 Challenge team that has just started the competition. As you can see from the picture, they are working remotely due to the outbreak. And also in the middle, we can see the Lorry Challenge team that has been selected for the semi-final and it is waiting for the next phase. So I want to conclude this brief introduction, just inviting you to participate to our next events of May and June. Of course, for now, these events will be done in a virtual format like that. And we will have a conference about geothermal energy and another one in the first week of June about machine learning and new technology in the oil and gas industry. We'll be in collaboration with the local chapter of Paris, and will be, I think, a great event, because during this event we will have a discussion panel composed by experts from these different companies, for example, Schlumberger, Total, and IFPN. So please follow our social media to stay updated regarding the dates. So let me conclude saying that we will also represent our student chapter in the AG Annual Conference 2020, that this year will be held in Amsterdam next December. And yeah, that's it from my own. So thank you for your attention. And now I will leave the stage to Jean-Pierre Deflandre. And thank you, Jean-Pierre, for being here today with us. Thank you very much.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm very pleased to contribute to this EEG conference organized by the IFP School EEG student chapter. So thanks for that. It's a great opportunity for us to deal with CCS, which is a very important topic. So indeed, as a project leader of, on one side, the Energy Transition MOOC from the IFP School and co-holder of the CARMA chair, the IFP School Chair on Carbon Management and Negative CO2 Emissions Technologies. This chair is supported by Total in association with Fondation TUC. Indeed, with these two roles, I was very, very happy when you, our students from the EEG student chapter, aim at organizing a conference on this CCS topic. So dealing with the chair itself, I prefer to answer to question if you have any at the end of the presentation. Just a few words. It tackles CO2 negative emission regarding the aspect of natural things, but also technological options such as BECCS, which is bioenergy combined with CCS, and DACS, direct air capture system combined with CCS. So as I just mentioned, CCS is a key step in all this story. So now I'm also very pleased to introduce Dominique Copin, who kindly accepted to talk about what CCS is and to share his experience with us. Indeed, Dominique Copin, I know him quite for a long time now, graduated from École des Mines de Saint-Étienne and has 40 years of scientific and industrial experience in the energy sector within the Total Group. Dominique gained extensive experience in the field of CO2 capture and storage within the climate strategy department of this group, working with a number of organizations, including the OGCI, the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, IOGP, International Oil and Gas Producer, and the CSLF, Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum. Retired a few weeks ago only, Dominique aims at raising climate awareness among new generation of engineers and leaders through courses, conference, debates. So that's why he is here today, and also participating to different associations such as the Evolen, the Professor Associates, and of course the alumni of his primary school, I should say the École des Mines. And so its main objective is to reach out to future executives in emerging countries. So Dominique, the online floor is yours today.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre, and thank you very much, Giuseppe, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And sorry, I'm not very familiar with the.
Okay, I just Dominique, yes. I just stopped sharing my screen, so you can just click on share your screen, and you can share your presentation with us.
Okay. Is it okay now? No, it's not. Sorry.
Yes, don't worry, Dominique. You can just click on share your screen on below. There is a green share screen button. You can just click on it.
Yes.
It's okay with your PowerPoint. Will appear soon. I think, yes, I think we can see your PowerPoint now. Yeah, thank you.
You have it? Okay, great.
It's fine.
You have my presentation now. You can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not familiar with this new tool. Sorry, it's the first time I do it. So thank you very much. So I think that there are, well, first I would like to say that I am retired from Total, which means that I'm not in Total anymore, but I am loyal to this company for which I have worked for 40 years. But let's say really today I am speaking as Dominique Copin and not as a representative of Total, because I'm not in Total anymore. The two main messages.
Sorry, Dominique. Dominique, sorry for interrupting you. I think your camera is still off, right? Can you turn on your camera?
Okay.
Okay, now it's sorry. Now it's okay. Sorry. Thank you.
It's okay?
Yes, now
okay.
it's okay.
Good. So the two main message I want to deliver today is first that CCS is a necessary condition for climate change mitigation, and second, that the investment of geoscientists like you is another necessary condition for the development of CCS. It doesn't mean that these two conditions are sufficient for climate change mitigation or the development of CCS, but they are necessary. We will need a lot of other technologies to mitigate climate change, and we will need a lot of other professionals to develop CCS. But nevertheless, CCS is an essential condition, necessary condition, and to make it simple, your involvement is another necessary condition for the development of CCS. Okay. I don't know. I have difficulties to cannot change my.
Go to the
okay.
next one. Yeah. You can
Okay,
just click on the screen. Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit slow. That's the reason. Okay. So I like reading books, and I thought I would make a comparison with a book which I haven't read for a long time, and I maybe for 50 years, which is The Ugly Duckling. So it's a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen about an ugly duckling whose fate is much better than it was supposed to be when he was born. And as in many fairy tales, you have a childish interpretation, an adult interpretation, and in this case, I will propose an interpretation from a CCS specialist point of view. So you have all these ducklings. Some of them are very pretty and very kind, like PV, wind, electric vehicles, smart grid or smart anything, or energy efficiency. All these ducklings are in fact low carbon technologies which have a very good image everywhere among the citizens and among the decision-making people and so on and so forth. You have another one, which is CCS, which is not so popular, which is not so beautiful. And the question is how to make this ugly duckling, because it is uglier than the others, how to make it fly like a beautiful swan. And this is, I think, this is a challenge which we have to face among the promoter of CCS. Okay, so the agenda for today is what is CCS, why CCS, in which reason is it an ugly duckling, and what will make it a beautiful swan, and who will contribute to this maturation from an ugly duckling to a beautiful swan. And I hope at the end of the day, I will have convinced you that you are part of the solution. You will notice that there is no question mark here. It's definite. I really believe this. So what is CCS? So CCS is a group of technology by which CO2 is captured from an emission site, usually a large CO2 emission site, I mean more than a few hundred thousand tons per year of CO2. This CO2 will be transported and then it will be stored. So this is a first way to see it. Another one here which insists a little bit more on the CO2 emission sites. You see that there are a few possible or potential CO2 sources, which are here in this graph: power generation, petrochemical industries, refinery. But we could add also cement industries, steel industry, fertilizer industry. All these industries and others produce a lot of CO2, and which is absolutely ready to be captured. We have the technology today to do it. And when I say we, I mean particularly the oil and gas sector, because we have a long history of separating CO2 from other gas, and therefore, and also to capture and transport it. So the main source of emissions of CO2 are described in this small table. So the first one is power and heat generation, which emit more than 10 billion tons of CO2 per year, and most of them being from coal power plants, and the other ones mainly from natural gas power plants. You see that cement industry and steel industry emit around 2.3 billion tons of CO2 per year. Hydrogen production is today emitting around 500 million tons of CO2 per year. But if hydrogen production increase as much as many people anticipate it will, part of this increase will be in the hands of the classical hydrogen production from methane and coal. From methane, it is steam methane reforming, and there are a lot of CO2 associated with this process. So up to 5 billion tons of CO2 could be emitted by this by hydrogen production in year 2050. Refining and chemicals also emit a lot of CO2. Fertilizer industry, natural gas CO2 sweetening emit a lot of CO2, and today the oil and gas industry has developed a lot of experience in this, and most of the CO2 capture and storage projects are based on natural gas CO2 sweetening. And bioethanol production is also a large emitter of CO2. Well, associated to these emissions, to these activities, we have not only CO2 emission quantities, but also qualities, which is relevant to consider. For example, here you see that one of the lowest concentration of CO2 is in natural gas power generation at 3%. From coal power plants, it's more, it's around 14%. And on the other hand, on industry, generally speaking, you have much higher CO2 concentration. And obviously, all other things being equal, and I must admit it is not always the case, but all other things being equal, the higher the concentration of CO2, the easier the capture of CO2. So here I will take an example which I know pretty well, which is the example of La Cruz, which is an industrial pilot which Total implemented around 10 years ago. At that time, it was one of the first integrated projects. And I think, at least from a pedagogical point of view, it's interesting to have a look at it and consider that you can change all the Lego of this project by anything, and you have many kinds of combinations to make CCS projects. So you have to look at the bottom corner on the right-hand side. This is the Lac Deep Gas Reservoir, which produce a gas which is an acid gas. So we have to treat it in the natural gas treatment plant. In order to treat it, you need a lot of heat. To produce this heat, you have a boiler, which used to be an air boiler. It was built in 1957. The Lac development is a very old one. And in fact, we converted this, or Total converted this air boiler to an oxy boiler, which meant that ahead of this boiler, we had an oxygen production unit, an air separation unit separating the nitrogen, the oxygen from the nitrogen, so that the combustion was only with methane, natural gas, and oxygen, so that we didn't have any nitrogen to separate the CO2 from it. So we had only CO2 and water. Water is pretty easy to get rid of because of its physical properties at atmospheric pressure and temperature. And then we had to treat this gas for questions of corrosion, to avoid the corrosion problem, and to use this pipeline, gas pipeline, which used to produce the gas from Rousse, the reservoir which you see on the left-hand side of this slide. Rousse used to be a satellite of LAC, sorry, and it used to produce gas during the 70s and the 80s. As you see, it is, no, you don't see it, but it is a very deep reservoir, 4,500 meters. So the initial pressure was 450 bars. At the end of the production, it was around 30 to 40 bars. So it was really a depleted reservoir in which we injected, or Total injected, the CO2, which was separated upstream by the oxy combustion process. So this is a typical example of what is a full integrated CCS project. So in terms of capture, there are several ways to capture CO2. So on the left-hand side, you have what happened in LAC. Mainly, the most important process is post-combustion. Maybe we'll have time to detail it a little bit, but I will go through it very fast. It's what we can call an end-of-the-pipe technology. You do not have to change anything in the process. You just treat the flue gas as they are, and via a process with amine solutions. The amine solutions are ready to capture the CO2 and not absorb the CO2 and not absorb the nitrogen, so that the nitrogen is free to go. And the CO2-rich amine solutions will go in another separator. So this is, this is where the amine solutions will take the CO2 from the flue gas. The nitrogen, oh, sorry. I guess you see my arrow, I hope. So the nitrogen will go in the atmosphere, and the amine-rich solution will go to the scrubber, to the stripper, sorry, where it will be heated so that the CO2 will be freed and then captured. So this is typically what will be applied in many plants in operation, whether they are power generation or industrial plants. Okay, and pre-combustion is more marginal for the time being. Okay, so in terms of transport, well, in LAC, it was a transport in a gaseous phase, but it is not representative of what will happen in real life, unless it is in a very small distance. More generally speaking, CO2 will be transported in a high density phase pipeline. And in another alternative is to have CO2 transported in ship in a liquefied phase, and ship which look very much like LPG ship. So storage. So there are mainly two storage types. So depleted gas or maybe oil reservoirs, like in LAC, and deep saline aquifers. So here you have a sketch prepared by the Global CCS Institute, where you see the kind of reservoir where you can inject and store CO2. We have saline formations. Well, the injection in deep and minimal coal seams is really a bit anecdotic. The potential is much lower than in saline formations and in depleted oil and gas reservoirs, which you see at number 4. And we can also use CO2 in the purpose of enhancing oil recovery. This is a type of a production process which is well known and have been developed for a long time in USA, but with CO2, native CO2. Okay. In terms of potential and uncertainties, let's say the highest potential of storage capacities is certainly in saline formations, but it is also where we have the biggest unknown on the real size or the real potential. On depleted reservoir, well, obviously, as you are aware, a depleted reservoir is a very well-known reservoir, but there are some difficulties which, let's say, the difficulties are linked to, for example, in the case of Rousse, the history of the reservoir was a bit, if I may say so, dramatic, since the pressure went down from 450 bars to 30 to 40 bars. So we had a few points to check on the quality of the cap rock and so on and so forth. So we had to do some geomechanical studies before qualifying this reservoir as a potentially gas CO2 storage reservoir. Okay, so why CCS? So this is the International Energy Agency view. This is a very recent report and a presentation which they made on it. So you see the reference technology scenario, which are more or less what has been decided or what the states have committed to do until now. And clean technology scenario is closer to the 2-degree scenario. And you see that we need to decrease the CO2 emissions very, very much. And in fact, we need to decrease it so much as to achieve net zero emissions during the second half of this century, which is not shown in this presentation, but I know that in the next presentations, they will tackle specifically this question of net zero emissions. You see that CCUS ranks third in terms of importance for CO2 avoidance volume. Well, the fact that it is third means that the challenge for energy efficiency and renewable is considerable. But also, when you look at the numbers at the end in 2060, it means that in this case, we will need to capture and store around 5 billion tons of CO2 per year. And 5 billion tons of CO2 per year is really a big amount. Today, we produce globally around 100 million barrels per day, or we should produce around 100 million barrels per day, which is in fact 5 billion tons of oil per day. So, roughly speaking, what is the challenge for the CCS industry or CCUS industry is to develop in 30, 40, 50 years' time an industry the size of which is comparable to the oil industry, which is really a big challenge. Another view, which is coming from the Zero Emission Platform. The Zero Emission Platform is an entity which is the advisor of the European Commission on CCS issue. And they produced 3 years ago, I must admit, but I'm sure the conclusions are still the same, and the approach was very interesting. They produced a comparison of two strategies to decarbonize the economies of 10 countries, one with CCS and the other one without CCS. And these 10 countries of Europe were the 7 largest economic countries in Europe, from Germany to Netherlands, and 3 other countries, which were Greece, Switzerland, and Norway. And they produce for each of these countries, first based on quite detailed description of the industrial and energy system of this country, each country and its evolution. They produced a simulation of what the decarbonation of their economy would be with these two strategies. So what is interesting is that all these countries, well, Norway is a special country, but all the other countries showed exactly the same kind of graph as the one I am describing to you. And this graph shows first on the x-axis the evolution of the emissions of all these countries from 2010 to 2050, and it goes the other way around compared to the way we are used to. So in 2010 we are around close to 3 billion tons of CO2 per year, and we decrease very much down to almost 0 or 5% of the initial emissions in 2050. This is the case with CCS. And without CCS, in 2050, we still have a lot of CO2 emissions. We managed to decrease because of development of renewables, energy efficiency, and so on and so forth, but we cannot manage to decrease as much as we can do with CCS. This is one point. And the other point is that the red curve is above the blue curve, because on the y-axis it shows the associated costs of these two strategies. And it shows that with CCS, you manage to do, in fact, more with less money. And on the right-hand side, you have a focus on the two points. Okay, so why CCS? In fact, and why the result of ZEP, and also why the result of IEA, is because if you have no CCS, you face huge investments in power generation, backup capacities, to face the issue of intermittency. Because there is a big difference between renewable energies, which are intermittent, and fossil-based power generation, which are dispatchable. The first produce power when it can produce power, and it doesn't when it cannot. While the other one produce power when you want it to produce power, and this makes a lot of difference. And this is the most spectacular difference between the two. And there are other differences. Unfortunately, I'm not a specialist in it. It's very much a question of experts of power generation and power system. But there are also other what they call ancillary services, which is given by the fossil energy, which is not by renewable energy. And nuclear power has a lot of virtue. It is not intermittent, but it lacks some flexibility. So no CCS is also a problem for energy-intensive industries, because in many processes, the temperature is very high, so you cannot achieve this temperature with electricity, whether it is low carbon or high carbon. More than 400 degrees. It is particularly the case in the steel and cement industry, which you know I showed. It is they are important contributors to CO2 emissions. And maybe even more importantly, these industries emit CO2, which has nothing to do with energy, but it has something to do with the basic chemical reaction. For example, in cement industry, you have a basic chemical reaction, basic process, which is CaCO3 plus energy gives CaO plus CO2. So the energy emits a lot of CO2, but the reaction itself emits some CO2, and which has nothing to do with energy. And for example, in cement, around 60% of the emissions are due to this process and not to the combustion. In steel industry, in a blast furnace, it's more than 50%, around 50%, which is linked to the process. So in this case, renewable energy, energy efficiency, nuclear energy is of no use. The only possibility is CCS or change of process, which will be really an uncertain and lengthy process. And no CCS also, last point, is that we will have no sizable negative emission technologies, and this is a link with the Karma chair, which Jean-Pierre introduced in a few words a few minutes ago. So if you have no CCS, you have no bioenergy CCS, and you have no direct air capture and CCS. So if you have no CCS, it is extremely challenging to achieve net zero emissions. And I would say, if I was completely sincere, I would say it is impossible to achieve net zero emissions unless you have other, you would trigger other solutions than low carbon solutions, like maybe change of society or something like that. Because with technology, in the fields of technology, it is difficult to imagine that you can do it without CCS in a reasonable time frame, at least. So in what is it an ugly duckling? Because it is an ugly duckling. And you will see that although well, I am very convinced, and I'm not the only one to be convinced of the importance of CCS, it doesn't develop as much as it should. And I will try to show why it doesn't. So this is what the IEA stated in 2009. So 11 years ago, they said, okay, today we are almost at zero. We were not at zero at that time, but with this scale compared to we were at zero. And in order to achieve quite large amount of CO2 capture and stored, in 2020, we need to have 100 projects on stream. 8 years later, in 2017, we are still in the same situation. Almost, in fact, we have 20 projects running. Most of them were already running in 2009, in fact. We still need a lot of CCS, whether it is on a 2-degree scenario or below 2-degree scenario. So there is a problem. And the problem, in my perspective, is that we see a lot of reason not to develop CCS. Well, on the top one, you see that it is associated with the fossil industry self-interest very often. It is too costly. You will see on the left-hand side. There are many alternatives. We'll never make it because the rates, the build-up rates are too aggressive. All this, from my point of view, and this is a position which I try to advocate with my colleagues, not particularly in OGCI, is that there is no real understanding of the value of CCUS, not only in the industry, but also in the governments, in the citizens, but also in many industries. So I will come back to literature again. And this is a quote from Oscar Wilde. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing, which I translate in my language, or CCS language. Nowadays, people know the cost of CCS, but do not know its value. And here is a sketch of results prepared by academics in Sweden, where they computed the extra cost of CCS in cement industry and steel industry. And what they see is that when you have CCS, it costs per ton of CO2 plus 70% compared to the case where you have no CCS. And for the steel industry, the extra cost is plus 25% compared to the case when you have no CCS. So these are really big numbers, especially in competitive markets, obviously. But when you consider it from the point of view of the final product, so for example, for a house or a building, the consequence is only plus 0.5% on the cost of the building. And for the car and the steel, the consequence is only plus 0.5% on the cost of the car. So depending on how you consider the problem, you see that you will have very different perspective on the whether it is costly or not. So in order to develop CCS, we need a lot of commitments from many stakeholders, because it is different from the other technologies, because the only purpose of CCS is to mitigate climate change. Photovoltaic, electric vehicle, energy efficiency have other purpose than climate change mitigation. Why CCS? This is the only purpose. So we need to make people understand the value of it, because there is a cost, definitely, but there is a value behind it. And the main stakeholders are governments, whether national and local governments, because there are some employment, for example, linked to the development of CCS, citizens, and power generation and industries. So all the ones which emit a lot of CO2, and I will focus on oil and gas, because oil and gas emit a lot of CO2, and the consumers, the clients of oil and gas emit a lot of CO2, and also the oil and gas is really the sector who knows what is geological storage underground. Okay, so here is a presentation from IEA, which for the first time, and this is due also to the action of some of us, to tell them, okay, be careful, because there is a question on CO2 storage. They show here what would be the impact on the development of CO2 CCS of the availability of a CO2 storage capacity. So on the left side, you have, let's say, there is no constraint on CO2 storage capacity. On the right side, there are constraints. So in this case, let's assume the CO2 storage capacity are not here to help us to develop CCS. So you see the consequences. The investment needs will increase a lot, partly because we will have a lot of low carbon power capacity to develop. And when we say a lot, we mean a lot, more than 3 gigawatts, which is half of today's global capacity. And in today's global capacity, you have a lot of coal, for example. And marginal abatement costs will increase a lot in the industry. So in fact, it will be much more costly. And in fact, CO2 use, which could be an alternative, is not at the scale of these few billion tons of CO2 which you have here. So early development of CO2 transport and storage infrastructure is critical. And I am not the one who say it. I think it is true, but it is the IEA who says it. So I think it is very important. So what is the role for EAGE and other organizations like yours? It is based on the fact that with no storage, you have no capture, you have no CCS, you have no climate change mitigation, you have no negative project. Well, the role is absolutely crucial, because there is no alternative to your expertise on storage. So how to make CCS fly from this ugly duckling to a beautiful swan? This is not a given. Oil and gas will play a significant role, particularly on storage. So you are key for this maturation to occur, particularly on storage. And it is absolutely essential, not sufficient, but essential to make it happen and fly. Thank you very much for your attention. And now let us move to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you very much for this great presentation. So now, as you said, it's time for the question and answer session. So I will be your moderator, which means that I will read all your questions as good as I can, at least. So we already have some questions on the conversation group, but for the one that maybe doesn't where's the conversation group, you just have to go down on the screen and you will have the conversation group. So I will begin to read the first question. So it's a question written by Grégoire 5. So he said that, I will just read. I've seen some carbon usage for oil enhanced recovery, CO2 EOR today around 500,000 barrels per day. Is that scalable for only marginal use?
Okay, so I think the use of CO2 for I think the additional oil produced by CO2 injection for enhanced oil recovery is something like 400,000 barrels per day in the States. I have in mind something like 60 million tons per year, but I'm not completely sure. But it is, let's say, at least it is below 100 million tons per year. So it is probably not scalable to 5 to 10 billion tons of CO2 per year. This is one point. The second point is that the enhanced recovery is a bit of a tricky problem because, well, it is a marvelous solution to produce additional oil, but this oil will emit CO2. So if you have the good ratio of CO2 injected and stored and the production of oil associated with all the CO2 emissions due to production, exploration, production, and refining and consumption, you can imagine that at the end of the day, you have a balance between all this CO2, the CO2 which is stored and the CO2 which is emitted. So you can say that at least you managed to produce carbon-free oil, but you did not really store CO2. So if the ratio is more favorable, then you can say that you produce low carbon oil and you store CO2. And if the ratio is less favorable, you are in a different situation. So in fact, enhanced oil recovery is a fantastic kind of project, but it is not really completely oriented in favor of climate change mitigation.
I can add a small comment if you want on that.
Of course.
Dealing with the enhanced oil recovery and the use of CO2, of course, it has to work with, in particular, some oil. So the benefit for me could be not producing more oil, at least, but producing more oil on existing mature fields. It means that you need not a lot of investment to continue to produce oil, and it can reduce investment in other places. And those investments can be reused in other domains, developing CCS, for example, or producing other type of energy, like geothermal energy and so on. It's clear that even with the best scenario to reduce CO2 emission, we still need, unfortunately, I should say maybe, a huge amount of oil and gas to answer to the energy demand. Putting CO2 into the ground to produce more oil is good if you consider that you are working on existing fields and you are enhancing local production without developing new big investments to produce more oil and answer to the energy demand. But it's only one part of the thing, and as mentioned Dominic, it's really a tricky problem because you are still producing fossil energy. But at the moment we need it, and we are with the situation of today at the corner to take new decision maybe, but it's a big challenge also. Just this comment.
Okay, perfect. Okay, the next question is from Leke. How does CCS help reduce investment in power generation backup capacities?
Oh yes. In fact, if you have no CCS, you will have no. Well, you will have to rely on nuclear and renewable energy. Renewable energy cannot produce power for 24 hours a day for obvious reasons. So when you do not have any production from sun and or wind, in this case, you will need either to have storage capacity of power, and this is the point. In fact, the capacity you need is obviously has to be above the average production, just because you have highs and lows in the production of renewables.
Okay. The next question will be from Amal El Abibi. Hello. Is there any study about the environmental drawbacks of storing CO2 deep in the ground?
Yes, this is something which we have considered. In fact, for example, well, I must say that for enhanced oil recovery, the problem is more limited, and in oil and gas reservoir, it's more limited just because these reservoirs used to have already some some products like, well, not the same kind of product, but it's not really an issue. The problem is more with the deep saline aquifers. So in fact, first we choose the target is deep aquifers because we need to be below 1 kilometer deep so that the density of CO2 is high, so that each porous volume accepts more weight of CO2. The water in this deep saline aquifer will be improper to any kind of consumption. Well, it will not be drinkable, it will not be usable for agriculture and also for industrial purpose. And a very important issue is the cap rock, to make sure that the cap rock is a full barrier for any movement from CO2 from the aquifers to the upper levels. And the other point, obviously, is to check the cementation, well, to identify all the ways the CO2 could get out of the reservoir. One of these ways is the wells themselves, the legacy wells and the new wells, and we have to check that the cementation is properly done. So this is an issue which is well tackled. And our experience in Sleipner and Snøhvit in Norway is very, very positive from this point of view.
I can also add some comment if you want on that topic. As Dominic said, I will say a challenge. If you consider that CO2 worldwide, you find it underground. As he said, in lake you produce gas, sour gas. In this sour gas you have CO2. So worldwide, the oil and gas industry is currently managing CO2 content from natural gas. So it's present already in the ground. You have somewhere you have pure CO2 natural gas reservoir. It means in the underground natural CO2 coming from, for example, the mantle and reaction below, are also coming from maturation of hydrocarbons, of organic matter, has been trapped. And sometimes you have 100% of CO2. It's not a big deal for the underground to have CO2, to store CO2. The big challenge is to find a structure, a very saline aquifer, which will not be used for any other issues, I should say, for storing CO2. And we are looking for very porous and permeable aquifers in order to easily store huge amount of CO2 in these aquifers. And what I want to highlight on is that the EU, for example, has sponsored a lot of research in the last 15 to 20 years to look at how storing CO2 underground, tackling every domain from identification of the reservoir, characterization of the reservoir, and so on. So all these different steps have been carefully studied in order to have a protocol to properly control and store. And when you decide, or if you look at storing CO2 in a particular reservoir, you have to have all the green lights at all the steps. And for example, in my experience, we have already looked for storing CO2 in some places. And just after making a seismic interpretation of seismics and simulation reservoir, we conclude that it's not suitable for storing. So the way to decide that is a long protocol with a milestone, and people are very aware, especially geoscientists, on what to do. So it's not, it has to be checked, developed, and validated. It's not one day we decide to put CO2 here. It's a long story. It takes more than 5 to 10 years to start and injecting and storing in an underground aquifer.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre and Dominique, for your answers. Just, I would like to ask you to briefly answer, because we have a lot of questions. So if you can take just a few seconds to answer, so otherwise we will not be able to answer to all questions. By the way, I would like to add that if we will not be able to read all the question, maybe we will take notes of them, and then we will come back to the people that ask question, maybe by mail, sending them by a mail with the answer, maybe, because I don't think we will have time to read all the question, but we will take note of that. So don't worry.
Okay.
Yes. Go on, Dalenda. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Jacques Savukurevich. I'm sorry, I cannot read this name. I'm not that good, sorry. So is there a possibility to use CO2 instead of injecting in and storing?
Yes, there is, but the order of magnitude of the quantity of CO2 which we can use is limited compared to the needs. We can use CO2 to make methanol, for example, or to make what they call e-fuels, association of making a combination of CO2 and hydrogen, for example. We can mineralize CO2, but when you look really at numbers and when you look at process, you see that yes, there will be a lot of opportunities to do it, but it will never be at the scale of a few billion tons of CO2 per year used. There will be opportunities for hundreds of million tons per year, but not billions of tons of CO2 per year. So there is room for use, but it will not solve the climate change issue.
Okay, thank you. Question from Ayan Sanjo. Thank you for this excellent presentation. Is a depleted CO2 reservoir a good candidate for CO2 storage?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry. Is a depleted CO2 reservoir a good candidate for CO2 storage? And are there any field applications?
Are depleted CO2 reservoir a good candidate for CO2 storage? I think so. I must say I never considered this point. Well, the experience is in the States. Well, it's a bit of a drama because for 40 years, and it's not a critique of what happened in the States from this point of view, but it's true that for 40 years, they did the opposite of what we want to do now. They produced CO2, which was underground for millions of years, and put it on the surface. And now we would like to do the opposite. So it's a bit ironic. But knowing the situation where we are now, I guess it could be a possibility, but it is definitely, again, it is too small compared to the challenge.
Thank you. A question from C-Card. Hello, which type of reservoir are best suited for effective CCS?
Okay, so what you need, I'm sorry, because I used to be a reservoir engineer. I have never been a geologist, so I hope I will not shock you too much. And it was a long time ago. I was a reservoir engineer, but at least what we need is a thick reservoir, porous and permeable, and obviously with a lot of with large volumes. In fact, what is important, in fact, is more the capacity to inject, because what the problem, the aquifers are very big, are very large, and if you inject the CO2 very slowly, probably they can accept huge quantities of CO2 without any significant impact on the pressure and so on and so forth. The problem is that when you inject the CO2, you have increase of pressure just because of the injection, and you need to inject pretty fast because the problem is deal with CO2 emissions which occur today. So you have to adapt. You have to have the same storage rate, injectivity rate as you emit your CO2. So you need a thick and permeable reservoir. Otherwise, you are limited. You have a limitation on your CO2 injection rate. And in fact, this is a big unknown in the aquifers. Will we find out enough aquifers with these characteristics so that we can inject the CO2 at the right rate compared to the challenge we are facing. This is a question mark. I have no answer to this. But, probably this will be a question which we have to tackle pretty fast.
And how can, a question from Yakan, how can we remove CO2 from the hydrocarbon during production?
Well, in a gas sweetening production, it's similar to the post-production which I briefly described. You have a stream of natural gas with other gas, so CO2 in this case, and you absorb the CO2 via an amine solution, which would take the CO2 and will not take the methane. So you take the methane on one side, and the CO2-rich amine solution will go in another separator, where it will be heated so as to free the CO2, and then in some cases, recent cases, we envisage capturing the CO2, and if we do not, we vent the CO2, and the lean amine solutions, so CO2 poor amine solutions, will go back to the first separator, the absorber, where it will take the CO2 from the gas.
Okay. Question. Sorry.
I don't know if Jean-Pierre wants to add something about that, or it's okay for you.
No, it's I will be too long. I will be too long on those topics. No, no, it's I will be too long.
Okay, okay.
No, no, you honestly, a lot of, no, in a few words, all the studies to store CO2, it could be in any kind of reservoir, I should say, a saline aquifer, depleted oil gas reservoir, a depleted CO2 reservoir. We have one case in the European project dealing re-injecting CO2 and looking at the integrity of the reservoir after its exploitation, whatever it was. It was, for example, one of them was the CO2 natural gas reservoirs that has been depleted in France. We look at the scenario of the life of the reservoir in order to state on the integrity when re-injecting into this reservoir. But if you just re-inject a few amount of volume, that's just put a pressure that is now below that the one it was before, you are still compacting around, okay? So it's a question of kinetics of re-injecting and the potential of the surrounding to maintain this pressure inside. And what you need is to be sure of the integrity of the access. But if you inject with an horizontal well deep water, it's fine also. So it will be too long, but we have looked a lot to these technologies.
Okay, okay, and then thank you. So we have now a question from Augusto. Apart from your project, which are the exception to the rule? The only way for CCS to become reality in developing countries.
Pepe, sorry, Pepe, your sound is jumping.
It's jumping my sound? Okay,
Yeah.
try to read it. Okay, try.
Sorry, I can't read either. Can you hear?
Yes, go on.
Oh, okay. Apart from EOR projects, which are the expectation to the rule? The only way for CCS to become a reality in developing countries would have a tax system for emission. Is through the development of CO2 tax system, right?
No, I think we need to be more open on this question. It's true that it is the solution will probably not be the same in developing countries and in developed countries. I think, well, this is a huge question, which is a bit out of the scope of today's presentation. My view is that quite often we tend to jump to conclusions. Generally speaking, there is a cost associated to CCS, and this is the problem of CCS. There is also a benefit, and this cost is very easy to handle. There is a benefit associated to CCS, and this benefit is very difficult to handle, but it is there. And the difficulty and the role of, let's say, the government, to make it simple, is to have a coherent way to make the different stakeholders support the cost of CCS depending on the benefit they take from it. And there are many solutions. There are probably more a basket of solutions than just solutions. I'm not very happy with tax system or even trading system, because with that, you will tackle the easiest CO2 emissions first, and you will not consider the most difficult one. And at the end of the day, you will have to tackle also the most difficult ones. And if you wait too much, at one time you will, in an optimistic scenario, and unfortunately we are not in this scenario, you will manage to handle the easy one, and you will find yourself in a situation where you are completely blocked because you take all the easiest CO2 to avoid, and you finish with a significant amount of CO2 which you have prepared no solution to get rid of. So I don't like very much all the things which are based only on price or cost or tax. You can have some performance standard which can help. So, many solutions. I think it's more a basket of solutions, but well, it's a difficult question.
Okay.
I think maybe 2 more questions.
Yeah.
To not finish too late, but don't worry, everyone. I wrote everyone's questions, so as we're gonna send you the answer by mail. So for the 2 last question, one is from Test Nudelman. Do you have an estimation of the cost of carbon capture and storage per ton of CO2?
Yes, well, it's a very wide range, because as you saw in one of my first slides, the conditions are very different. When you have to capture CO2 from a 3% concentration stream, or when you are in the DAC system, direct air capture, when you have 400 ppm, which is extremely low. And on the other side, you have some case where you are almost at 100%, in which case you just have to compress the CO2 almost, and some treatments. So you have a very wide range. Let's say the ballpark is between 20 and around 100, 150 dollars or euros, which result in cement being 70% more expensive, steel being 25% more expensive, power generation being more or less 50% more expensive.
Okay.
So for the last question, is this CCS very productive to reduce the CO2 emission than the production of aspirillin? It's an algae which nourished by CO2. As Gunther Pauli said, you said CO2 is bad, and that's because we do not what to do with it. So we are bad, not the CO2.
Yes, I agree that you might have a lot of opportunities to do much better out of CO2 than store it and hope it will stay in the ground forever. But the problem, so there is a lot of merit in developing these technologies, and no problem with that. The problem is that when you accumulate all these technologies, you will not make 1 or several billion tons per year. You will still have a lot. You will have solved only part of the problem. So okay, do it. I mean, and it's good to do it, but don't consider that you have solved the problem with this. There is there will be an excess of CO2 to get rid of. And you will, at the end of the day, you will have to store it.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry for the one that we didn't have time for the questions.
Yes, thank you very much. So we will come back to the other question maybe by mail, so don't worry. There were a lot of questions, so thank you for that. We had a lot of participants all around the world, as you can see from the map. So we are very proud of that. And I would really like to thank you, our speakers today, Jean-Pierre Deflandre and Dominique Coppen. Thank you very much for your presence today. It was awesome. And yeah, we can see you next time in another event.
Okay, with pleasure. Thank you very much.
And for me, I want to thank Dominic, and I want to thank the student chapter for this organization. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was also a pleasure for me to share with you. It's very important.
A pleasure to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you,
too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
I saw very relevant questions. We have another time to deal with.
Yes, yes.
Jean-Pierre, don't worry, I will send
Yeah, I know.
and I will give
I
you
see the
homework.
one from Natalia, for example.
Yes.
All the best. Take care of you.